worked with a couple a while ago where one of the partners was turned on by the concept of being swallowed and like feeling what it's like to be inside their partner's esophagus. And together, this was actually a really fun session because their partner was totally accepting of it, like no shame. They were like, let's do this. And I was there to help them figure out how to make this a role play.
Hello and welcome. Today I have Niki Davis Fainbloom, aka Miss Bloom. Miss Bloom is a non-monogamy pleasure and fetish coach. Welcome, Miss Bloom. What exactly is a non-monogamy pleasure and fetish coach?
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, a fetish coach, it involves a lot of different components. A lot of people have a lot of shame around their desires, and started to speak to a lot of people who are dealing with just desires that they think are really uncommon and that kind of they think makes them feel like alone in the world. They're actually really common. And a lot of the shame people feel is really a result of society as opposed to a result of anything being wrong with them.
So what exactly is a fetish as compared to other kink or something like that?
Yeah. The current definition that I'm working with is basically an enduring erotic fascination with a specific body part, body action, or object. And these objects of desire are usually not regarded as sexual by the rest of the population. So when you think of body parts, like feet is a really common fetish, but also toes, legs, ears, any part of the body can be a fetish. Body actions can be. Yesterday, I talked to someone who's really turned on by smoking. But if you have a focus on any type of body action that for most people is not sexual, and for you, it makes you feel aroused and excited, that could be a fetish. There's a lot of people that have desires towards specific objects. And what I find fascinating is how like our desires shift as our culture shifts. To give an example, something like quicksand was like really popular in the movies, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. And around that time, basically people who were being exposed to cinema as their sexuality was developing, developed quicksand fetish. It wasn't like super common, but it was something that happened a lot. And now that quicksand is no longer really prominent in movies, it's no longer a fetish. And there's like all this just like interesting data that you can look at in terms of how fetishes shift with culture.
Interesting. What would you do in a coaching scenario with somebody with a fetish? Would they come to you because they're feeling shame around the fetish, or they want to explore the fetish?
It's a lot of different things. I think the main reason that people come to me is because they are experiencing shame or it's having an impact on their relationship. I work with a lot of people who have been married for 30 years and haven't felt comfortable telling their partner what turns them on the most. And then often what happens is either they get caught in something where they're like talking to someone, engaging in their fetish, or just engaging in self-exploration, they get caught, or they realize that they feel like they're living with two selves, their fetish self and their other self. So a lot of the work that we do is try to figure out how to integrate these two selves, which it isn't easy because there's so much like stigma around fetishes still. I think the sex positive movement has come so far in so many ways.
And now, is a fetish a kink? And when you say a foot fetish, I've actually seen profiles on Bumble. There are people, and I always thought it was so crazy. And now being in this world, I'm like, oh, at least they talk about it on their profile, and you don't end up on a date with them and they're taking your shoes off. You don't know why.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel so weird. I was talking to someone the other day, and he was saying that he had a client who had a fetish, whatever, like with this part of the arm, and like she needed to have it when they were getting intimate. What makes it a fetish versus just a kink? Or are they the same thing?
I think that's a great question. When you think of kinks, there's an umbrella term, and within that, a fetish is one example of that. So a kink is defined as something that's arousing but falls outside of the boundaries of what society considers normal, which again, we can get into that. There's a lot there. But basically, a kink would include if you're into group sex, are you into voyeurism? Are you into exhibitionism? It's like broader, like all types of BDSM fall within the realm of kink. Okay. But what we see with fetishes is they're very specific. They're very long lasting. They usually start when people's sexuality develops, and it's just a little bit more encompassing. But I do think that part of the stigma around fetishes is people think that if you have a fetish, that's the only thing you can get turned on by. But in my research, like I've already interviewed about 250 people with uncommon desires for my book. And so many of them have this sort of uncommon desire or fetish and also are turned on by other things. Like I was interviewing someone a few days ago who was turned on by like sneezes, but also making out and also massages. There's so many levels to their sexuality. So I think one of the biggest myths around fetishes is that it is fully encompassing and it's something that people practice alone and that it actually like detracts from their ability to find partners. And a lot of the work I do in coaching is helping people realize that there isn't anything to be ashamed of and that you can find your community, and that a lot of people that I've spoken to have done a really good job of integrating these uncommon, silly, cute desires with their sexuality and their partner's sexuality. It's like society is what makes it a big deal.
If you're not hurting anybody, you're not forcing anybody to do anything, then go to town.
Go to town.
Or you do someone else as long as they're into it.
Exactly.
What is the strangest fetish that you, I guess by now, what's strange is to you is not as what's strange to me, but
yeah,
I'm in person. What would be?
Yeah.
Or what?
Okay, so I worked with a couple a while ago where one of the partners was turned on by the concept of being swallowed and like feeling what it's like to be inside their partner's esophagus. And together, this was actually a really fun session because their partner was totally accepting of it, like no shame. They were like, let's do this. And I was there to help them figure out how to make this a role play. So we ended up constructing this plan that is hard to explain, but using their household items, they basically built a giant stomach so that it could feel like their partner was inside, like looking out. And then they tried it and they said it was like there was a lot of laughs, but it was also an erotic experience for the person with that fetish. So that fetish is called vor.
How does that develop?
Yeah, good question. I think that's the same question as with any fetishes. So there's a few fetishes that have a little bit of research based on biology. Like I think foot fetish is the most common one where there is a neurological explanation that kind of makes sense. But with pretty well all the other fetishes that are out there, there's so much we don't know. What I know from my research and conversations is for a lot of people, it is some form of conditioning where they have an early sexual experience and whatever the fuck happens to be around during that time can become eroticized and impact their sexuality forever. So to give an example of that, someone discovered masturbation in their mom's closet, because why not? And there were like all these stockings there. And then they ended up masturbating and coming on the stockings. And then for the rest of their lives, they were just like super, super into people of all genders wearing stockings. When you have a sexually potent or memorable moment, and there's something else that happens to be there at that time, for some people, that can be enough to start a fetish for the rest of their lives. For some people, it requires more exposure or not just one experience. Sometimes it's multiple experiences. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting research there. One study found that they were able to pair boots with images of like beautiful naked women. And they had heterosexual men look at the naked women and look at the boots. So they became like erotically paired. And then after a while, they would get turned on just by looking at the boots because in their mind, that's associated with the sexy naked people. And then they did a follow-up study where even pennies, which is like the least sexy thing ever. I don't even know if people still have pennies, but they made people eroticize pennies by pairing it with sexy, beautiful people that they're attracted to. And even after you're exposed one day and then you are exposed to a penny like 5 days later, there's still that erotic pairing that maintains.
Wow. You said that there's an explanation for the foot fetish, but which is much more common. What is that versus these other fetishes?
So in your brain, there's an area called the somatosensory cortex. And basically all the sensations you feel throughout your body are there in your mind. And it just happens to be that the feet and the genitals are right beside each other in that area. So through like slight misfirings, the theory is for a lot of people, feet become sexualized. And to prove that, there's some really interesting case studies. For example, there was one person who had an amputation of their leg, and then they were having orgasms like through their perceived amputated leg because there was just like the energy and the neurons of their brain and their foot were just like intertwined. There was also a woman who had foot orgasm syndrome, which is just when you have orgasms through your feet for no identifiable reason. So it is shown that they are neurologically linked. I don't know if that explains all of the fetishes, but when I talk to people with foot fetishes more than people with other fetishes, I often hear that for them, it's less that there was a sexy moment and it's more that they were already interested in feet from the time that they were born. And then that kind of led to them having a sexy moment with feet.
It's funny because a foot fetish to me doesn't sound like is more normalized because we hear about it. My audience is a lot of midlifers whose sex life may be a little waning, shall we say, or non-existent. If somebody wanted to start to introduce something or had a fetish that they've been hiding from their partner, what would be a way to start to bring it to the forefront or integrate it into their relationship or sex life?
A lot of people with fetishes try to like subtly non-verbally introduce it. And I would say that's not always the way to go. So if you have a foot fetish, you just put your foot in someone's face while you're having sex. And I've seen that go not well. So I would recommend creating a container to have a conversation around it. So many people have shame around fetishes, but like bringing the shame into the conversation is going to make it more likely that their partner's not interested in it and sees there's something wrong with it. So I recommend bringing it up in like a fun, playful way and just starting a conversation about, hey, I know we've been together for a while. Are there any fantasies or desires that you haven't explored? And I often recommend the person with the fetish starts by asking their partner that to see what's going on with them. And then ideally, if their partner is a thoughtful, caring person, they'll be like, what about you? And then you have this conversation. And I recommend if one partner has a fetish, put some thought into how this could be explored with your partner. Because I think people often don't really know what it means. If I was to be like, hey, I'm turned on by the concept of being like shrunk to a small person or whatever, or something more common where it's like I'm turned on by balloons or leather. Like I think it's something that it's helpful to have practical examples to share with your partner so they can really see if it's something that they're open to. And I think there is some like fairly good kink and fetish porn out there that can be helpful to show if it seems like their partner's interested in it. But I think it's just normalizing having these conversations around sexuality and desire. And I think one way to bring it up is, I don't know, have you heard of the yes, no, maybe list?
Yes.
There's a lot of those. And I often, like when in my first session with couples, I ask them to fill it out separately and then just have a conversation about what are you sexually interested in that you haven't yet explored? Because oftentimes there's more overlap than couples think. It's just really hard to like first figure out what you want and then be like, say it out loud to a partner. A lot of the work I do with fetishes or just in general with couples and with people is to help them figure out what excites you and how do you get confident enough to share that, knowing that you don't necessarily know what your partner's response will be, because it's vulnerable to put yourself out there and say that you're into something, not knowing how it will respond, because I think we're still in a world that's struggling to become sex positive. And I've worked with a lot of people where they finally get brave, tell their partner, and then their partner's, ew. And then you're like, what do we do with that?
And I'm sure that happens a lot. It's just, I've heard it on the more common, somebody wants to open up a marriage and the other partner is completely no way, but that yet they don't want to have sex with their partner, with their
exactly. That's a very common one. Yeah.
There's a platform that I'm an affiliate of called aria.fy. That's a great tool as well for couples who want to do something with each other's fantasies without face to face having to tell each other what it is to start.
Yeah. And Aria is really good at finding that middle ground when partners have different desires, finding a scene that is like maybe for one partner it's a little more vanilla, but for the other partner it's like pushing their boundaries. And I think that's really important, is to find a way to push but not surpass partners' boundaries, specifically when it comes to kinks and fetishes, because sometimes I see partners who aren't really comfortable that just want their partner to be happy, so they say yes and try something, and then after that's like a traumatic or difficult experience. So I highly recommend, like when trying something new, it's better to start slow and to work your way into it and to have a way to communicate throughout to make sure that both partners are really enjoying themselves.
Right. We should all be consenting and want to do whatever it is that our partner wants, or don't do it. If you like this episode and want to hear more, you can listen to the full interview wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Taboo to Truth or check out the link in the description.